following announcement has been paid for by the Wrestling Epicenter.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, guys.
Hello, ladies. Remember me? Let me talk to you, dummies.
It's now time.
It's theater time. TikTok.
It's showtime!
For the longest running wrestling talk show in history.
We are huge. It's gonna be cool.
You're where it's at.
You smell like me.
Tune in each and every week.
You better keep listening, or I'll come out of your computer
And turn it on for you.
or else I'm gonna kick your stinking teeth in.
We've been known by a few names.
The needs of the many far outweigh the needs of the few.
The interactive interview.
Interactive interview. Oh, yeah.
Interactive interview.
The interactive interview. Interactive interview. The interactive interview.
Interactive wrestling radio.
Interactive wrestling radio.
Interactive Wrestling Radio.
Interactive radio.
Interactive wrestling radio.
Interactive wrestling radio.
The Blaze.
Blaze 1260 AM.
The Blaze.
The Blaze.
Blaze. The Blaze Rock.
And a lot of other names.
Weekend Warrior of Wrestling. The Pile Driver.
The Epa Wrestling Center.
3 Count Wrestling.
The Hours Lab.
But it's all one show. The Wrestling Epicenter.
Wrestling Epicenter. The Wrestling Epicenter.
The Epicenter.
Wrestling Epicenter, dude. The Wrestling Epicenter. Don't get off.
And your host from day one,
By ignorance or arrogance.
James Walsh.
Wake up, sleepyheads.
Dr. Carol House.
It all starts
What a rush. Oh, Boomer Sooner.
Thank you very much.
I got 2 words for you. Thumbs down. Breaking necks and cashing checks. I've heard a lot about you guys.
Check it out. Get out of my face. You win!
But I'm desperately out of time!
So what you gonna do when Blaze-a-mania runs wild on you?
now.
Welcome back to Interactive Wrestling Radio. Joining us on the Newsmaker line for the first time, I believe, since the weekend before Slammiversary 2013, which happened to be his swan song with Impact Wrestling. Hopefully it's nothing swan song-like going forward. Joining us again is Todd Keneley. Mr. Keneley, are you with us?
I am with you.
It's a pleasure to have you back on the show, and of course we're having you on to talk about the new pay-per-view concept coming from the United Wrestling Network. Prime Time is the name of the pay-per-view series. What can you tell us about what's going to be hitting us on September 15th?
Yeah, Primetime Live is a new concept. It's going to be weekly, hour and a half, and it's going to be 100% live. It's going to be shot out of a location called Thunder Studios out here in Southern California in Long Beach. It's a huge entertainment campus. They shoot all kinds of movie stuff there, commercials, and they've got a really cool space that we're building out for now for Tuesday's premiere. And it's going to be an interesting show. We recently went back to production at Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. So a couple weeks ago, we did a 2-day shoot, shot 6 episodes. So the first new episode aired last weekend. You could still, catch it on United's YouTube or on Fight. And, we shot some really, what I thought was some of the best TV we've done in our over 10-year history. And Aaron Shooter Stevens, you might know him as the NWA National Champion, came in for the Hollywood program and is working in the creative aspect on that show too. And it really showed just a lot of new talent debuting and a lot of cool segments, a lot of, seeing stuff outside of the ring and backstage. And now we're going to try and take that momentum into Primetime Live. And speaking of the NWA, really leverage that great connection that David Marquez and the United Wrestling Network has had with the NWA for, many years. Obviously, there was that dip for a while. But then with William Patrick Corgan, Billy Corgan, bringing back the brand, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood was really utilized in the early days of 10 Pounds of Gold. That's where you first saw, Tim Storm come back out with the title in front of a live audience. It was right there at Ocean View Pavilion. all this Storm match for the title was, at Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. So it helped them kind of relaunch and then into ultimately doing their own thing with NWA 70 and then Power and everything else. But then, of course, the world came to a close for a while, and Power had become such a phenomenon, and people loved it, and it was such a great, throwback, and just had such a great, pure pro wrestling spirit about it. But a big part of that is the fan base at Georgia Public Broadcasting Studios at the GPB.
Right.
And without that, I just don't think the NWA wanted to return with that program without live fans in attendance. So, but this is something that's been brewing for a while to kind of reignite that relationship with the United Wrestling Network and the NWA. So that's, kind of the driving force for Primetime Live. So you'll see stars from the United Wrestling Network, from Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, Championship Wrestling from Arizona, and some of the other promotions we work with. But you'll also, it's really, and Dave Marquez has said this, it's really an open door policy. And so, for instance, I think it's scheduled to be the first match right out of the chute will be Alexander Hammerstone, who is going to be defending the West Coast Pro Wrestling Heavyweight Championship. But, you may also know him as the MLW National Champion. Incredible talent. Is going to defend against EJ Sparks, who's a United Wrestling Network talent, 3-time Arizona State champion, and has wrestled on both our Hollywood and Arizona shows. So a unique match that you wouldn't really see. And Hammerstone has wrestled on Championship Wrestling from Hollywood in the past, but he hasn't been on our programming in a long time. So I think it's kind of a good indication of, the door is kind of wide open for talent you wouldn't necessarily expect to come through. And then, especially, when you talk championships, you talk about the main event, 10 pounds of gold.
Very cool. Championship Wrestling from Hollywood is available so many different ways now, but I mean, where I have it set up is my DVR records it, and it records it right after Ring of Honor off of Sinclair, one of the Sinclair channels. And it's pretty cool to see how far Championship Wrestling from Hollywood has come. It's by no means just a regional promotion, just a regional show.
Yeah, it really has come far, and the expansion continues. I mean, we're on in so many markets. I think it's something like 130 television markets, and now we're doing regional broadcasts of the show. So there's Championship Wrestling on CW30, which is in Memphis. We have our own local hosts. Dustin Maria Starr hosts that program, but then it's the matches themselves are that week's Hollywood matches that would air on our normal episode. So it gives it almost like a primetime wrestling feel where you have studio hosts leading to the action. They do a great job. We have a similar broadcast like that up in the Northern California Bay Area, one in Amarillo, Texas, now in Tampa. So more and more people are seeing the product. And, in the pandemic age, when it kind of forced even the major promotions to put on some form of studio wrestling, when there weren't live crowds, I think our program really held up to even the biggest of competition and, or companies, because, Marquez has done studio wrestling for decades, and we really dialed in the Ocean View Pavilion. I really think it looks, great on TV, to the point where Impact Wrestling is shot there. New Japan Pro Wrestling is shooting there now. They shot Lions Break Collision. They're shooting Strong out of that venue, which really was, just put together piece, we'll add a couple monitors, and now we'll do this and that. And it's really just grown and grown. I mean, when it first started, it had these big, like Roman looking columns and red curtains. And now, I mean, there's TV monitors everywhere, and it really looks nice on camera.
Yes, it does.
So I think, Dave could kind of flex a little bit, and the company could flex. And that was one of the things that he did when this all started, is he put some action from Hollywood next to WWE when they were in the Performance Center with no fans, next to AEW, before they were really doing like Daly's Place, and because they, I think, ended up doing a really good job with their presentation. And I think even Impact when they were shooting in small venues. And I mean, it really was kind of hard to decipher where the big budget shows were versus what we were doing. And so it kind of just grew from there. But yeah, the program continues to grow, but this is a huge big step, because live, 100% live, the NWA involved. I think, a great way to kick it off. I think a really intriguing matchup that no one probably really expected, with Nick Aldis defending against Mike Bennett. But I mean, just the emotion and the story and the real life story of Bennett with his challenge, I think is just something a lot of people can relate to,
Absolutely.
And it really just has that incredible, I hate to say underdog, because, Mike Bennett's been an incredible competitor and performer for years.
Right.
But, for what he's gone through, it's almost got that, James Braddock, Cinderella Man type feel. Like, come back and take out the seemingly unbeatable champion, And I just think it's great. I think what NWA did with bringing back the 10 pounds of gold, which just aired, I think really just even more in-depth look at those two. And I'm really excited for that match and excited to call it. And I think the hope is that, the NWA fan base will be excited to see all this back in action, defending the gold against a really, really interesting and different challenger. And then Camille will be back in the ring as well on this pay-per-view.
Against Heather Monroe.
Hopefully they'll against Heather Monroe, the Killer Bay, the queen of championship wrestling from Hollywood. So that's interesting too. I mean, Heather has really been expanding. She was on AEW. She faced Hikaru Shida. And Camille has been unstoppable. So that'll be interesting. But then they'll tune in for, the NWA talent that they want to see. And they'll be exposed to all kinds of other talent. And I think that's the whole thing. The show, as David Marquez has called it a lot of times, is kind of like an all-star game or an all-star show or a cavalcade. Of course, he would use like an old school word. It's a cavalcade.
Cavalcade of stars, yeah.
Marquez is like 47 going on 87. He's such like an old soul, But it'll really be a unique sampling of talent. And I really think it's going to be fun.
Awesome. Well, this is not the first time that a wrestling promotion has tried weekly pay-per-views. NWA, TNA, ironically enough, back to the NWA. They were associated with Total Nonstop Action, now Impact Wrestling. They did weekly pay-per-views out of Nashville. And, I got to be honest with you, I was kind of out of wrestling for a while. I stopped when we lost ECW and WCW at the same time, and I just wasn't watching, and those pay-per-views brought me back. You think these pay-per-views can have that effect for other fans like myself, where I was, 18 years ago looking for wrestling instead of hoopla? They want to see wrestling. You think this will maybe speak to those fans?
We certainly hope so, and we believe so. And I think NWA Power did a great job in doing that and just bringing back a traditional pro wrestling program that people could just have fun with. And but Power was a whole lot of character and promos, and this is going to be really the emphasis is going to be on bell to bell. In what you saw with the 10 pounds of gold, like this matchup couldn't be any more real for both Bennett and Aldis. And and the training, and there's questions, Aldis had a recent title defense in Texas, but other than that, hadn't been in the ring in 5 months outside of training, just like anybody else. So it's going to be, it's a unique environment. But I can tell the fans that, are wondering, is it going to be, no one's going to come out and talk for 20 minutes to start this thing. It is going to be, we are going to start right off the bat. You're going to see Hammerstone EJ Sparks, and we'll be off and running and off to the races. The vast majority of that 90 minutes is going to be, people battling it out, great talent from all over the place, battling it out inside the ring. The extreme heavy emphasis is on action on this program.
Awesome. Now, you mentioned Hammerstone, and he's an Arizona boy, just down the road from me.
Yes.
I got to talk to you. Do you mind if I ask you just a couple questions about something other than the pay-per-view, and then, of course, we'll circle on back around? All right.
Of course.
I was one of the folks who was either up really early in the morning or recording it and watching it, Paragon Pro Wrestling, where I first saw Mr. Hammerstone, and you were the main commentator, yourself and Jeff Aiken, calling that action. I love that stuff. That was a great broadcast. I really enjoyed what you guys were doing. What did you make of that time in your career?
I enjoyed it. It was an opportunity that it took me kind of out of the Wrestling Network for a time. But, over the years, I would kind of come and go. Obviously, I left to do Impact Wrestling for a while, came back to Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, had the opportunity at Paragon. I mean, Paragon was a blast. It really was. Shout out to Sam's Town in Las Vegas, which now, Impact is shot there, Ring of Honor. It's just such a perfect, little wrestling venue for televised wrestling. And got to reunite with so many people. D'Lo Brown was working backstage as an agent for that show. And D'Lo and I were really close at my time in Impact, so it was great working with him again. Gangrel, who, I just have so much respect for Gangrel, David Heath. He is, veteran, and I just think, obviously he had one of the best entrances ever in WWE and Attitude Era and everything else. But I don't think ever really got to show during that run, what he's capable in the ring. And he's, definitely even, he's long in the tooth, no pun intended, or maybe very much intended, in the fang these days. But he's like, honestly, you look at him, he's got his own wrestling school, Gangrel's Wrestling Asylum out in Florida. He looks to be in the best shape of his life. The guy is just, unbelievable, and he would give back so much to talent. We had a lot of great talent there. Hammerstone, one of them, and Hammerstone eventually, became champion on that program. Alex Chamberlain, they were, a team. Jesse Sorensen. It was just a pretty stacked talent roster and a really fun show. And, working behind the scenes, a gentleman, Jared Gainham, who was kind of running production, ended up doing a lot of, the story stuff too, and the segments. And I just thought that he came in a few weeks in, and our debut episode, I just don't think was as strong as the show eventually became. The show really gained legs as it went on. And I think maybe people had already given it a shot and never came back to it. But the people that either came in later or stayed with it, I think really found it to be an enjoyable program. And I, certainly loved calling it.
Absolutely. And what I loved about it was you guys, and similar to what Championship Wrestling from Hollywood does with the Ocean View Pavilion, you guys had one venue. I grew up with Sportatorium being, that's the home base of World Class. That's the place. And even to some extent with the WWF, Madison Square Garden, that's home base. And you guys had your home base and your crowd that was there every week. Obviously a lot of that stuff was taped at once, but you had your familiar fans that were definitely up on things. So I think you guys just had a really great show. I was sad to see it go. I'll be honest with you on that.
Yeah, no, for sure. A lot of people were, and it was just one of those things. It wasn't, it was a expensive show in a way to produce, just in traveling everybody in, and and they used pretty decent name talent, and it just wasn't paying off in the long run. It got, we tried, and they were trying different things to bring it back, and got to a point where we just got the word like, hey, that's going to be it. But I think everybody that was on it benefited from the experience. Certainly a lot of great times and great memories. And I think that those episodes are still up on Fight. So if, people could still go check them out or relive them. But yeah, it was fun while it lasted, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, let's circle back to happier times, modern times, talking about the pay-per-view that's going to debut on Tuesday night. What is the broadcast team going to look like? I'm going to assume that the person I'm talking to right now, yourself, will be calling the play-by-play. I
will be calling the play-by-play. Very happy, very honored to be doing that. Excited to be live, flying without a net. There's just a heightened, everything that we call for Hollywood, for instance, we'll shoot multiple episodes. But, everything I call is live to tape. I call it like it's live. But when there's that just that urgency of, hey, this is what you say goes, and it's live. It's just a different animal. And but I'm excited for that. So I will be on play-by-play. Initially, it's going to be Alyssa Marino, who was recently with NXT as an on-air talent, and she was with us as Kathy Campanelli as a backstage interviewer on Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. So she is going to step in on color for these at least first few episodes. She still lives out in Orlando, but is coming into town for this. I think eventually I'll be joined by my current Championship Wrestling from Hollywood color commentator, Blake Bulletproof Troop, who's great. He's a MMA heavyweight top contender, fights for Lights Out Extreme Fighting out here, which I also call. We'll have Dave Marquez will be doing some backstage interviews. Adnan Qureshi will be ring announcing. He's the Hollywood ring announcer. And then Joe Galley will be checking in. So Joe will, the voice of the NWA, will be checking in from his home base in San Antonio with, different segments or interviews or news reports are coming up because, with this, although it doesn't necessarily have to be held to like an episodic TV, obviously we're just trying to put on great wrestling shows each and every week. Obviously there's going to, be some hooks put into what's going to be coming up next week. And I'm sure, and what talent will be coming our way from the NWA. And I'm sure Joe will be bringing us that. So, this is going to be, I really think that the 90 minutes is going to fly by because it's going to be we're going to be constantly on the move. There's going to be very little downtime.
Very good.
But yeah, it should be great. It should be a lot of fun. And, in the future, there's certainly room for Joe Galley to come out and join me on commentary, which would be fun. That way, in essence, I'm representing National Wrestling Alliance or the United Wrestling Network, although I've called a lot of NWA action over the years. Joe, the current voice of the NWA, so we'll have that kind of double perspective. But yeah, I just think it's, and there'll be a lot of flux. And that's the thing too, is you'll see talent return. I would suspect that, it is going to have that big fight feel. Whoever comes out of this thing, its main event, whether it be challenger Mike Bennett or champion Nick Aldis, they'll probably have a couple weeks to find out who their next opponent is, have time to train, and then I truly believe that the 10 pounds of gold will be defended on Primetime Live every probably 2 to 3 weeks. Awesome. Thunder Rosa will be on the program. She's obviously very active as of late. So
yes, absolutely.
If she's still the NWA women's world champion by the time she actually is in ring on our program, then the title will be defended one way or another. But and that's the thing. If you look at the card, there's obviously a huge main event, a lot of unique talent local to here and beyond. But you're also going to see there's going to be some surprises. Some other people, I believe, will probably from the NWA, and some people maybe that are NWA that have a lot of history in Hollywood aren't just going to sit back and watch it on TV. I think they're going to show up and have something to say. Might want to talk to the people. So watching at home, because there won't be people in the house other than us. But
so that does answer my next question. There's not going to be a live crowd then.
There will not. No,
okay.
There will not, at least initially. Obviously, things are starting to reopen. It was very encouraging to see 17,000 people at a football game.
Oh, yes.
Last night.
That was awesome, yes.
In terms of California is still pretty strict, and this is, a legit TV and film studio that is under, pretty harsh guidelines to be able to resume production. But that's why I'm glad I had 6 episodes of Hollywood to call recently with no crowd. And then watching it back, obviously we want our fans there. We want our fan base. We want the noise. We want the passion. But, in a way, there's give and take and plus and minuses. Yeah, I just think the wrestlers get to be so much more vocal. You see so much more of the character come back and come out. And you can, every strike just resonates
Mm-hmm.
And we got some guys like the Tribe and the Wolf Zaddies, two of the most dominant tag teams we've ever had. They are going to, they're going to be laying into each other. So there's going to be strikes that are just echoing off that Thunder studio, and it's going to have that big fight feel. So one thing I was kind of trying to get to earlier is we kind of see this show as like an MMA or boxing show, in that we're matchmakers trying to put on a great fight card, and that's in essence what this is. Obviously there'll be characters, there'll be stories, but the real emphasis is on the action, and we're just trying to put together great wrestling fighting, events.
All right. Do you have time for two more questions, and then I can let you off the phone?
Of course. No, man, please.
All right. So let me pick your brain a little bit. I don't know your age. I don't really want to know. I'm not asking that. But you and I clearly grew up watching a lot of the same wrestling. We loved that 80s WWF feel. I can hear a lot of Gorilla Monsoon-isms in your commentary. So I definitely know that that's something that you grew up loving. And sometimes, and this has been discussed, especially with the emergence of AEW, a lot of people have said, well, that's wrestling, but it's not the wrestling that I like. What do you think of the progression of wrestling, the way wrestling has changed and gone from the gigantic superheroes to maybe the smaller athletes that can do a heck of a lot more than what the larger guys could do?
Yeah, I did grow up in the 80s, and I'm glad I did. It was just such a golden era and heyday. And I had the benefit of growing up in, the kind of 80s larger than life, Hogan, Piper, Andre, atmosphere. And on the other side, having the NWA with, Flair and Race and Steamboat. And so you had the best of both worlds. I really did enjoy wrestling, and I always talk about this. I used to really love the Royal Rumble, the little spots where let's go to some of the participants, and then there's Earthquake, for like 15 seconds talking and stomping around. Then you go to the model who's got the, sweater around his neck and the bottle of it, the sprayer of arrogance. Right. And then there's Mr. Perfect, and there's Macho Man, and then there's Hulk ranting and raving. And it was like everything under the sun, all shapes and sizes, all kinds of different characters. I mean, to me, that's pro wrestling. Mm-hmm. But there's certainly something to be said for incredible athletes and athleticism. And I really like to see, whenever possible, as good of a mix of that as possible. So, and I think in some respects that is kind of coming back. You're seeing big guys again. In addition to just incredible high flyers. Mm-hmm. And, with the NWA, like with Power, for instance, I think they found a good mix of the nostalgia and bringing back, guys like the Rock and Roll Express that are legendary in the NWA, but will still go out there and perform, guys like, Trevor Murdoch, who is a throwback if there ever was one,
exactly,
just
right.
as tough as nails, trained by Harley Race, in addition to great young talent and guys like, Caleb Connolly, Ricky Starks when he was there. And then also new characters that really fit that old school pro wrestling persona, like a Zicky Dice, like when he won the TV title. So I think they've kind of found a good mix, and that's the way our Hollywood program is going now as well. And AEW is kind of, you see Tully Blanchard out there and, mm-hmm. And guys like that. So they've kind of got that mix going as well as like working old school names and storylines and things that happened in the past into current day programming. So I think it's for my taste, at least recently, it's been going in the right direction. I'm having fun watching again.
Oh, that's great to hear. And the last one's kind of a cream puff, kind of a layup here for you, but it's what platforms, how can people find the pay-per-view, the Primetime Live pay-per-view series?
Primetime Live is available on traditional in-demand pay-per-view, so cable satellite. I think it's $11.99 per episode that way. Mm-hmm. On Fight, you got a couple good options. On the Fight app, each episode's $7.99. Or they're doing a 4 episodes, you get the month bundle for $23.99. So that's hard to beat, and I know it's hard to get people. There's so much wrestling on TV, and I know it's hard to get people to open their wallets these days. But we really are trying to be a true alternative, and we're going to give you tons of action. And I definitely think that at that price point, it's certainly worth giving it a shot, because we're going to give it everything we've got.
Awesome. Hey, I tell a lie. One last question. I've noticed a trend. Maybe you can shed some light on this as an Arizona guy here. I noticed that a lot of the recordings that I've been doing of late on the AZTV7 broadcast of Championship Wrestling of Arizona, they've been airing the Hollywood feed instead. Is that going to be something that we're going to see continue until maybe the end of the pandemic, or do you think that we're not going to see any more films specifically for Arizona as we once did?
I do know what will be happening in pretty short order. Obviously, we had 6 episodes of Hollywood to shoot, and we're launching this pay-per-view series. Arizona for a time was kind of such a hotbed, in terms of numbers with the pandemic. But as far as I know, and so just for crew going in and traveling in and stuff, it just wasn't an option at the time. From what I understand, what will be happening, at least in the interim and soon, will be that new episodes of Championship Wrestling from Arizona, rather, will shoot, but we'll shoot them at Ocean View Pavilion. But that should be happening, I would think, over the course of at least the next month, but hopefully within the next couple weeks. And then, brand new episodes, brand new matches of the Arizona show will then debut.
Awesome. All right, man. Well, I'm looking forward to Tuesday night. You're right. There is a lot of wrestling out there. Not all of it's catered to my liking. And I got to tell you, NWA Power was a sweet tooth of mine. It was something I really look forward to. And if you guys can take that and add your flavor to it too, that will just be a fantastic mix. And I wish you guys nothing but the best of luck.
I appreciate it, man. Tune in on Tuesday. It's going to be time to fight on.
The preceding announcement was paid for by the Wrestling Epicenter.
On the listen, and if you like what you heard, I'm glad. If you didn't like what you heard, well, go fuck yourself.
Most people don't hung up on me.
We had a lovely conversation.
What a show.
Oh, mercy, Daddy.
On the radio dial. Don't hang up. Bye-bye.